Around the world, millions of people live in places where floods are not a disaster, but a way of life. On vast floodplains, entire villages rise above the water on stilts. Families travel by boat instead of roads. Fields are planted knowing they will one day be washed away, only to be replanted when the river retreats. These are the flood tribes, communities that have turned survival into tradition. Their daily lives are shaped by the river's rhythm, adapting to a cycle of destruction and renewal that outsiders rarely witness. From farming techniques to unique architecture, each tribe has found its own way to live with water that never stands still. Our story begins with the Warao. In the far reaches of Venezuela's Orinoco Delta, where the land dissolves into endless channels and lagoons, live the Warao, a people whose very name means the boat dwellers. Here, the river is not a boundary, but the entire world. From the air, the delta appears like a vast green labyrinth, streaked with winding silver veins of water. The earth itself seems unstable, suspended between swamp and tide. Yet for centuries, the Warao have called this shifting floodplain home, moving with the pulse of the Orinoco as it swells and recedes. Theirs is a landscape that resists permanence. Villages perch on stilts above the water, fragile yet enduring, rising above the currents like wooden islands. Canoes glide silently beneath towering palms, their wakes rippling across mirrored channels where sky and river blend into one. The Warao's resilience lies in this fluidity, their lives designed for a world that transforms daily, where dry land is rare and the flood is constant. But to live in the Orinoco Delta is to embrace both gift and trial. The waters offer abundance. Fish dart in great numbers, birds descend in clouds, and palms provide fruit, fiber, and shelter. Yet these same waters swallow crops, rot timber, and breed swarms of insects. The struggle is not against the flood, but with it, to bend and adapt, never to conquer. Generation after generation has endured these waters, their survival written into every canoe carved, every pole raised, every channel memorized. At the heart of Warao, existence is a harmony with impermanence. They read the currents as others read the wind, knowing which way the tide will turn, which tributary will open, which lagoon will vanish beneath seasonal surges. The delta is not merely their environment, it is their identity, shaping a people as fluid and intricate as the waters themselves. Moken. Across the turquoise waters of the Andaman Sea, scattered among hidden coves and mangrove-lined shores, dwell the Moken, often called the Sea People. For centuries, their world has not been bound to land, but to tides, currents, and shifting horizons. To see the Moken from above is to glimpse a way of life adrift between islands and sea, where wooden boats replace houses and water is both pathway and home. The floodplains and coastal shallows of this region are treacherous yet bountiful. Each season, storms roll in from the Indian Ocean, reshaping the coasts with torrents of rain and surging tides. What appears solid one month may be submerged the next, sandbars erased, mangroves drowned. Yet where most would see instability, the Moken see continuity, a rhythm of change that has guided their existence for generations. Their boats, known as kabang, are more than vessels. They are floating homes, carved from hollowed trees, carrying families through lagoons, coral reefs, and flooded estuaries. Children learn to swim before they walk, diving effortlessly into the depths, their vision adapting underwater with a clarity few possess. This intimate bond with the flood and the sea is not a skill, but an inheritance, passed quietly from one tide to the next. The waters provide, but they also demand reverence. Fish, shellfish, and sea cucumbers sustain life, yet the storms that lash these coasts remind the Moken of their fragility. Each cyclone carves scars across the islands, sweeping away mangroves and reshaping shorelines. Theirs is a world where nothing is fixed, where even the ground beneath their feet may vanish beneath the swell. But the Moken endure, guided not by permanence, but by movement, reading the sea as others read the stars. At dawn, as the tide retreats, their boats drift silently across glassy channels, silhouettes etched against the rising sun. The horizon is endless, yet every inlet and tidal flat is mapped in memory, each current and shoal woven into stories as old as the waves themselves. Bajau. In the shallow seas of the Philippines and Malaysia, where floodplains meet coral reefs and mangrove forests breathe with the tides, live the Bajau, a people often called the sea nomads. For centuries, their lives have floated between shore and horizon, shaped by water's endless rise and fall. From above, their stilted villages rise like fragile constellations over turquoise lagoons, while boats drift silently between them, tracing paths as old as memory itself. The Bajau belong to a world where land is never certain. Along coastlines that flood and retreat with the monsoon rains, they have learned to live lightly, to root their existence not in soil, but in sea. Homes stand on wooden stilts above tidal flats, tethered against waves, yet swaying with each storm. Below, the sea is both larder and lifeline. Fish glimmer in the shallows, seaweed carpets the flats, and shellfish cling to mangrove roots, all sustaining a people whose survival has always been intertwined with water's shifting moods. But the Bajau's resilience is tested each season. Monsoon winds churn the ocean into walls of water, sweeping away homes and reshaping coastlines. Floods rise without warning, submerging paths and fields, erasing the fragile line between land and sea. To endure, the Bajau turn to the skills passed down through generations, building homes that can be abandoned and rebuilt, navigating channels invisible to the untrained eye, diving deep into the flood's abundance with lungs trained for extraordinary breath. Their mastery of the sea is legendary. Many Bajau children learn to swim before they walk, their bodies molded by tides. Divers descend to astonishing depths, hunting with wooden spears in the quiet blue where light dissolves. Some remain underwater for minutes at a time, their ears adapted, their vision sharpened, their pulse slowed to the rhythm of the ocean itself. Yet beyond skill, it is their philosophy that has sustained them, a quiet acceptance that the sea is both giver and taker, that to resist its floods is to invite ruin. The Bajau have survived not by holding the tide back, but by flowing with it, shaping lives that bend rather than break. At dusk, when the tide creeps into the mangroves and the horizon glows with fading fire, the Bajau's silhouette is etched against the sea, boats resting on calm water, homes perched above its mirrored surface, families suspended between earth and tide. In a world where rising waters reshape the map each season, the Bajau remain, a people carried by the flood, yet never lost to it. Chao Lei. Along the scattered islands and tidal flats of southern Thailand lives a people who call themselves the Chao Lei, the people of the sea. To outsiders, they are sometimes known as sea gypsies, but to the waves, they are children who have never been strangers. From the air, Their villages rise delicately above flooded sands and turquoise lagoons, houses perched on stilts like wooden lanterns above water that never sleeps. Between them, narrow boats glide silently, tracing paths carved by tides that have guided generations. The Chow Lei live where land and sea are never separate, where the monsoon floods wash into the mangroves and retreat again, leaving behind glistening sands and shifting channels. Their world is impermanent, yet alive, a place where the earth itself is rewritten with every tide. To most, these waters are unstable. To the Chow Lei, they are home. Each season, the floods return, reshaping the coastlines, drowning lowlands, and sweeping through stilted walkways. Storms thunder across the horizon, their rains pouring in torrents, raising seas that reach into villages. Yet this constant threat has never been something to resist. Instead, the Chow Lei have learned to live in rhythm, with waters advance and retreat, shaping lives as fluid as the tides themselves. The sea is their provider, and their knowledge of it is profound. Generations of Chow Lei have memorized the subtle signs of the flood. The way wind changes color on the water, the pull of currents, the dance of fish in shallow waves. They dive with effortless grace, children plunging beneath the surface with lungs trained by practice, eyes adjusting to the blur of the underwater world. Fish, shellfish, and sea cucumbers are gathered not only for sustenance, but as part of a sacred bond with the waters that sustain them. But it is not only skill that defines the Chow Lei. It is an acceptance that nothing is fixed, that life must bend with each season's surge. Their homes can be abandoned and rebuilt, their boats redirected, their paths redrawn. This is not fragility, but resilience, a way of living that turns impermanence into continuity. At sunset, when the tide seeps into the mangroves and the sea burns gold beneath the fading sky, the Chow Lei stand as witnesses to a truth older than any storm. That survival comes not from resisting the flood, but from moving with it. In a world where water forever rises and falls, they remain, guardians of a life written on the tide. Kin Delta farmers. Where the Mekong River breaks into 1,000 silver channels before meeting the South China Sea, a world of endless floodplains unfolds. This is the Mekong Delta of Vietnam, a land of water and silt, a living mosaic shaped by the river's ceaseless rise and fall. Here, for generations, the Kin people have built their lives, carving a bond with a landscape that is as fertile as it is fragile. From above, the delta shimmers like a mirror, rice paddies glowing emerald beneath the sun, canals weaving through villages like veins of glass. Each season, the floodwaters surge south from the mountains of Laos and Cambodia, spilling across the plains, submerging fields, and swallowing roads. For many, this flood would be disaster. For the Kin, it is lifeblood. The rising waters leave behind rich layers of silt, renewing the soil, feeding the crops, and sustaining one of the most fertile farmlands on Earth. Life here is a delicate balance. Houses rise on stilts above canals, tethered against the currents. Boats replace carts, drifting between markets, schools, and fields. Children grow up with water at their doorsteps, learning to swim in the same currents that carry the season's harvest. The river is not obstacle, but artery, binding together countless villages in a watery web of trade, travel, and survival. Yet this gift of the flood comes with hardship. Each year, storms sweep down from the South China Sea, rains pour in sheets, and tides rise higher than expected. Entire fields vanish beneath brown water, homes strain against the currents, and lives are remade overnight. Still, the kin endure, adapting with patience carved from centuries of resilience. Dikes are raised, canals redirected, crops replanted. Like the river itself, their strength lies not in resistance, but in flow. At dawn, mist lifts from the delta, revealing a horizon without end, water, fields, and sky blending into one. Farmers wade through the shallow floods, their reflections bending in the rippled surface as they plant new seedlings into the soaked earth. It is a cycle as old as memory, repeated with each season. The flood arrives, reshapes the land, and departs, leaving life renewed in its wake. Banjar. In the vast wetlands of South Kalimantan, where rivers weave like silver threads across endless swamps, live the Banjar, a people whose history has always been bound to water. Their world is the Matapura and Barito rivers, great veins of life that rise and fall with the rains, flooding the plains and turning land into shifting mirrors. From the sky, their villages appear to float, houses perched on stilts above the tide, boats gliding through narrow waterways as if streets were carved from water itself. The Banjar have mastered this liquid landscape. Their homes rise on wooden stilts, anchored against the surging floods that visit each year. Floating markets bloom upon the rivers at dawn, boats laden with fruit, rice, and flowers drifting side by side in colorful constellations. For the Banjar, water is not simply environment, it is the foundation of their identity, a force that both sustains and challenges. Each season, the floods return with unrelenting certainty. Torrents of rain swell the rivers, bursting their banks, spreading across the lowlands in a slow, unstoppable tide. Fields vanish, paths dissolve, and the horizon becomes a vast, inland sea. But where others might abandon such a place, the Banjar endure. They adapt by moving with the waters, planting rice suited to floods, fishing in newly formed lakes, and trading across channels that appear only when the river swells. Life here is a constant negotiation with impermanence. A boat is as essential as a home, for on any given day, the road may vanish beneath the flood. Children learn balance before they learn words, growing up on swaying planks and narrow canoes. The river is school, market, pathway, and larder, carrying both hardship and abundance in its restless current. The Banjar's resilience lies in their harmony with this shifting ground. They do not try to command the flood, but instead reshape their lives to its rhythm. Where the waters rise, they build higher. Where rivers expand, they find opportunity. It is a quiet strength, born not from resistance, but from flow, from centuries of listening to the language of the tide. Mekong floating villages. Where the Mekong River slows and spreads across the heart of Cambodia, a remarkable world emerges. A world not built upon land, but upon water itself. These are the floating villages of the Mekong, entire communities rising and falling with the river's breath. From above, they appear like drifting constellations, clusters of homes moored in the shallows, boats gliding between them as if streets were liquid, drawn fresh each day by the flood. Here, permanence is an illusion. Each year, the Mekong surges with the rains, swelling across the plains and reversing its tributaries. The Great Tonle Sap Lake expands more than fivefold, swallowing forests and farmland, reshaping the very geography of the country. Where once there was dry earth, water stretches as far as the eye can see. Yet in this transformation, life flourishes. The people of these floating villages have made the flood their companion, building a way of life that drifts with the current, rather than standing against it. Homes are lashed together with bamboo, and anchored to the riverbed, rising and falling as the water demands. Schools float, markets drift, even temples rest upon rafts, their reflections glowing in the river's surface at dawn. Every necessity is tied to water. Fishing nets lowered with the sunrise, boats carrying goods from one floating door to the next, children learning to paddle before they can read. But the flood is never gentle. With abundance comes danger. Sudden storms whip across the river, waves batter fragile walls, and the swollen current carries away whatever is not secured. Crops vanish beneath the tide, and with them the certainty of tomorrow's meal. Survival here demands vigilance, ingenuity, and faith in the river's cycle. Yet for all its peril, the flood is also the lifeblood of these villages. The waters bring fish in unthinkable numbers, filling nets and sustaining families. The silt carried downstream enriches farmlands once the flood recedes, feeding rice fields that stretch toward the horizon. The people have learned to see not destruction, but renewal, to find continuity in the flood's ceaseless rise and fall. At dusk, as the Mekong glows red beneath the sinking sun, the floating villages seem to drift into the horizon, their silhouettes etched against water that never rests. They are proof that humanity can adapt to the most fluid of worlds, that even where land disappears, life endures. The Mekong's waters may rise and fall, but the floating villages remain, forever carried by the rhythm of the flood. Tonle Sap Fishers. In the heart of Cambodia lies a lake that breathes with the seasons, the Tonle Sap, a body of water so vast and restless that it doubles, even triples in size each year. Fed by the Mekong, it swells when the rains come, its currents reversing, its banks dissolving, its waters flooding into forests and fields. To witness it from above is to see a living tide, a floodplain transformed into a world of endless horizons. And here, upon its shifting surface, dwell the fishers who have made this lake their life. The Tonle Sap is not merely a lake, it is a pulse, a rhythm of expansion and retreat, a flood that sustains millions. Each year, when the waters rise, they spill into the surrounding forests, creating a drowned wilderness where trees stand half submerged, their roots hidden beneath brown water. This is when life bursts forth. Fish swarm in uncountable numbers, moving with the currents, filling the lake with abundance. For the fishers, this flood is a gift, but one that must be chased, seized, and honored before it slips away. Villages rise along the lake's edge, built on stilts so tall they tower like wooden watchtowers above the seasonal tide. When the waters climb, boats replace roads. Families move seamlessly from land to water, casting nets where crops once grew, drifting into forests where birds nest in flooded branches. Every sound here is waterborne, the slap of an oar, the rustle of nets, the echo of voices across the open lake. But abundance does not mean ease. The flood brings peril as well as promise. Storms sweep across the lake in sudden bursts, waves hammering fragile boats. Homes must withstand months of submersion, their stilts rooted deep against the shifting currents. And when the water retreats, it leaves behind scarcity, the lake shrinking, fish harder to find, survival more fragile. The fishers endure these cycles, shaping their lives around a truth older than memory. Nothing here stands still. At dawn, when the mists lift from the lake and the sun strikes gold across the flood, the fishers set out in long, narrow boats, silhouettes against the shimmering expanse. Their nets fan open, catching both fish and the light of a new day. They live in harmony with a lake that grows and recedes, a flood that both sustains and threatens. In Tonle Sap's restless waters, the fishes remain, guardians of a world that is always changing, yet forever alive. Okavango Delta dwellers. In the dry heart of southern Africa, where desert stretches endlessly toward the horizon, a miracle of water appears each year. This is the Okavango Delta, a vast inland floodplain where a river loses itself to sand and transforms the desert into a labyrinth of shimmering channels, lagoons, and islands. From above, it is a vision of contrasts, blue veins of water fanning across gold and green, a living oasis in a land of thirst. And here, among its shifting floodwaters, dwell the people who have made this watery wilderness their home. The Okavango is unlike any other river. It does not flow to the sea. Instead, each year, floods arrive from distant highlands, spilling slowly across the delta, drowning plains and awakening the land. Dry earth blossoms into marsh, grasslands sink beneath the tide, and wildlife gathers in great numbers, elephants wading through channels, antelope leaping across reeds, birds rising in clouds above the mirrored surface. For the people of the delta, this cycle is both challenge and salvation. Villages rise on the higher islands, safe from the deepest floods, their huts ringed by papyrus and palm. Dugout canoes glide silently through the waterways, carrying families, hunters, and fishers between shifting channels. To live here is to read the river's language, to know which channels will flood, which islands will vanish, which paths will open as the waters expand. The flood is not resisted. It is anticipated, prepared for, and woven into every choice of planting, building, and traveling. The waters sustain, but they also test. Fields are swallowed, homes are cut off, and storms sweep across the plains without warning. The people endure by shaping their lives around movement. Homes built with materials ready to be replaced, crops chosen for flooded soils, journeys made by boat when the land disappears. Their survival is written in adaptation, in the quiet acceptance that nothing here remains fixed. At dawn, when mist curls above the floodplain and the first light glitters on the reeds, the delta comes alive. Fishermen cast nets into the still waters. Families paddle across quiet channels. Children play in the shallows, their voices carried by the wind. It is a place where water defines every breath, where life itself bends to the flood's rhythm. Amazon Floodplain Tribes. In the heart of South America lies the Amazon, a river so vast it carries more water than any on Earth. Yet its true wonder is not only its size, but its rhythm. Each year, rains from distant mountains swell its channels until the river spills across the forest, drowning millions of acres beneath a shimmering tide. The floodplain, known as the Vazia, becomes a world transformed. A drowned forest where trees rise from water, their trunks half submerged, their crowns alive with birds. And within this realm of rising rivers live the floodplain tribes of the Amazon, people whose lives are written into the rhythm of the flood. From above, their villages seem to float between worlds, built on higher ground or anchored on stilts, surrounded by endless green, broken by the silver of rivers. Homes, pathways, and even farmlands bend to the water's rise and retreat. When the flood arrives, canoes replace roads, drifting through forests where fish dart between tree roots. When the waters recede, fields re-emerge, rich with silt left behind by the river's gift. For these tribes, the flood is not a disaster, but a season, a pulse that sustains. The waters bring fish in staggering abundance. Tambaki, pirarucu, and countless others fill nets and sustain communities. The retreating floods leave fertile ground for planting cassava, maize, and fruits. It is a cycle of giving and taking, where survival depends on patience and memory, knowing when the waters will rise, when to fish, when to plant, and when to move. Yet life in the Vazia is never easy. Storms sweep across the canopy, rivers surge without warning, and homes strain against currents that test even the strongest stilts. Insects thrive in the humid floods, and hunger waits for those who misjudge the river's turning. Still, generation after generation, the tribes endure by embracing impermanence, their lives shaped not against the flood, but with it. At dawn, the forest is a mirror. Canoes glide between half-drowned trees, their paddles sending ripples across reflections of sky and branch. The sounds of the jungle, the cry of macaws, the splash of fish, the distant hum of insects, echo over waters that seem endless. In this flooded world, the tribes move with grace, carrying ancient knowledge of the river's moods, bound to the Amazon as tightly as its waters are bound to the rain. Here, in the vastness of Brazil's floodplains, the tribes remain, guardians of a forest that becomes a sea, living proof that humanity can not only survive, but thrive in a land where the ground itself disappears each year beneath the tide.